Matt, an interesting thing happened this week.
It sure did. I was on Facebook and I saw a message from Scott Herzog.
Yeah, I am taking a bit of a Facebook break for myself.
So how did you find out about this?
I went on as a Sci-Fi Christian to post our Super 8 video, because I'm just doing Sci-Fi Christian stuff. Okay. And I noticed that Scott Herzog had posted and that he had called me out.
He tagged you and called you out. Scott Herzog of the Sci-Fi Diner podcast.
Yes. On their listener feedback episode, they have called us out, me in particular,
yes,
but the Sci-Fi Christian as a whole.
Yeah, I mean, you're my co-host. I'm obviously taking your side.
You are the best sidekick, Matt.
Thank you.
Or tag teaming, if we want to go back to the wrestling thing from earlier.
Very good. So tell us, everybody, what he had to say, and you can check this out. What episode? Do you have that handy?
Clips.
Oh my gosh. What episode are we getting this from if they want to listen to the full episode?
I don't know that it was numbered. I will get that while we play the first clip.
Okay.
All right, so the first one, they had disagreements with me on Fringe and Star Trek. Mm-hmm. So their first one addresses Star Trek.
But before we get started, we have a little bit of a bone to pick with the Sci-Fi Christian Podcast. Now, we absolutely love their podcast.
Right.
If you haven't checked out the Sci-Fi Christian Podcast, you got to check these guys out. Ben DeBono and Matt Anderson, great guys. And they typically do some really good conversations on topics that debate about spirituality and sci-fi. And interesting topics. Wouldn't you say, Miles?
Oh, absolutely. I've enjoyed, they've talked about aliens, ghosts, Bigfoot.
Dr.
Horrible. And most recently, post-apocalyptic,
Brady Harden loves that.
Right.
He's a big post-apocalyptic man. Mm-hmm. But you had a little bit of a bone to pick with, I think, Mr. Ben DeBono.
Yes. This was on their episode talking about ghosts. And you can expect, I'm addressing it now, but you will get a hate voicemail from me sometime soon.
Oh, this will be good to hear.
In the most loving way. In the most Christian way. We'll give you a loving hate email.
I love you in the Lord, but I hate what you had to say about Star Trek. There's a correction, Ben. Star Trek does not suck. Star Trek rocks, and if you continue to hold on to that opinion, well, I will continue to love you in the Lord, even though you'll be wrong for the rest of your life.
Oh yeah, we should call them out, have like a little debate. We get Larry Nemchek on the show, and have a little chat with the Sci-Fi Christian Podcast on the relevancy of Trek.
Why Star Trek does not suck. Right. Why it does rock. And,
maybe even how it actually, even though it doesn't tend to talk about spirituality, addresses a lot of spiritual themes throughout it.
Well, there was,
we get Chase Masterson in on that. Doesn't she talk about?
She does.
She's a huge spirituality person.
Yes. Yeah, so fell in my pocket. Well, and I think I'm going to address this. I mean, in that show, and it was an interesting show. I mean, I encourage our listeners, if you want to hear some.
We are not saying don't listen to the podcast. We just are disagreeing with them on the point.
I'm having a little fun with them.
That and disagree about your Fringe comments, but we'll talk about that in a moment.
But as far as the issue of God and spirituality in Star Trek, yes, you're right. In Next Gen and in future shows, it wasn't talked about as much. It was more leaning towards the secular humanist, because that's what Gene Roddenberry was. He was a devout secular humanist. However, in the 60s, that philosophy of his probably either he didn't feel either brave enough at the time to express it, or maybe his views weren't quite there yet. But they did talk about God a couple times in the original series, and in a positive light. And
there's some excellent episodes on Voyager about spirituality. Captain Janeway kind of rejecting spirituality, but having to embrace it, having to take stuff in faith.
Right.
That one episode where she has to she thinks she has to do all this stuff to earn her faith, and she just has to believe it.
That's a good one. Well, Deep Space Nine, even though it was a darker show, we're not saying, it did talk about spirituality with the Bajorans. I mean, it was a very important part of their identity and who they are, and would help get them through the occupation of tough times. So maybe not, the Christianity we hold to was explored or spoken favorably. I mean, it wasn't totally, devoid of spirituality and devoid of, maybe not, maybe it did hold times that it elevated it.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. So, Ben, you were specifically called out on a rival podcast, a rival sci-fi podcast.
Yeah. So,
how did you feel, Ben? Tell us your feelings. Now, when you heard this for the first time,
like seriously or for fun?
For fun.
Okay. Oh, I'm deeply hurt.
Really?
I'm furious. No, it's all in good fun.
Definitely.
And we definitely recommend the Sci-Fi Diner.
Yep.
That said, it's game on.
It's game on.
Yeah.
Hashtag Sci-Fi Feud.
But quickly before I forget, that show is Sci-Fi Conversations 25.
Okay, and I do want to congratulate them, even though we're about to feud with them. They just reached their 100th episode.
So great podcast. Please check them out.
I'm clapping for them.
Okay.
Okay, and now let's feud.
Okay. So first of all, my objection to Star Trek is not its religious content or any lack thereof.
Before I see where you're going with this, I don't want you to take it too far because I want to challenge them to a debate. So if whatever you say, keep it to the minimum so we can save our ammunition for when we face them live.
Okay, so I'll keep Star Trek to this. Number one, I would not watch Star Trek.
So you would watch it?
I would watch Star Trek, even with its spiritual content being humanist, anti-Christian at times or whatever. That doesn't bother me. I'm happy to engage with ideas. A lot of science fiction is like that, and I read tons of stuff that falls into that camp. So doesn't bother me. I like to engage with it. I like to wrestle with the ideas. My issue with Star Trek is that, by and large, not all of it, but by and large, it's pretty boring a lot of times. Wrath of Khan is great. The most recent movie by J.J. Abrams was great. I loved both of those. But Star Trek the Motion Picture may be one of the most dull, sleep-inducing experiences I've ever had in my life. That movie is horrible.
Okay. What about? But you haven't watched a lot of the Star Trek series, have you?
I have not. I've watched some of the original series, and I quit watching it because I couldn't stand it. It was cheesy. It was boring. It was predictable, bland. I did not see what the attraction was. I've seen a couple of the other movies, and I just don't get what's so great about Star Trek. I loved what J.J. Abrams did with it, where you really felt like you got to know the characters, but most of Star Trek just feels really bland to me. And I think Star Trek the Motion Picture, perfect example of that, where we spend hours upon hours, at least that's how it feels, journeying into this cloud for a really, really stupid payoff. Or the scene at the beginning where they're about to board the Enterprise, and it's like a 5-minute scene of Captain Kirk circling the Enterprise in the shuttle.
Yeah, you've talked about that many times.
So boring.
So, Ben, here's what I propose. Miles, Scott, hello out there. I know you're listening. And we want to challenge you to said debate. You want to talk about the relevancy of Star Trek? That's fine. You want to talk about something else revolved around how good or how not good Star Trek is? That's fine. Ben and I are prepared to face you.
Yeah. I would love to be converted, actually, and become a Star Trek fan, because I'm a fan of science fiction. I'm
actually a fan of Star Trek, but I'm taking your side because co-hosts stick together.
Yeah, we got to stick together.
Yeah.
I just don't get it.
In the meantime, until we have this debate, I'm going to be posting through our Twitter some random, maybe not true facts about Miles and Scott. And you can follow those
all in good fun.
You can follow those at hashtag Sci-Fi Feud.
Sci-Fi Feud. Should we get to part 2?
Yes,
of
part
our Sci-Fi Feud, where they bring up Fringe. And here, where I think Star Trek's maybe a bit of a disagreement, there's some serious misinformation going on here. So get ready to be taken down, Scott and Miles. It's part 2 of the Sci-Fi Feud coming up immediately.
One other thing, and I think this is Ben DeBono, so we're just calling you out, Ben. You do not like Fringe. I'm a huge fan of Fringe, and I think it is one of the best written shows that's out there.
Right.
That you have in sci-fi. And so I need some good rationale, something that we could maybe talk about here as to why you don't why you really don't like Fringe. And I think maybe it has to do with you can't let go of Peter being the Dawson's Creek guy, and maybe the fact that he was on Dawson Creek is kind of burning you a little bit. I really think you got to give this show another chance and watch it from beginning up to the end of season 3, and then talk about it.
And he's arguing for less Fringe, not more Fringe.
Yeah. But okay. Are there episodes that are weaker episodes? By all means, in any show.
Any show.
But I think holistically, I'm glad that we had 21, 22 episodes of Fringe this season. I enjoyed them and the character development, and there seemed to be, especially in the later half of the season, a continuing arc that kind of drew us closer together.
And even though not all the episodes there were some episodes that went away from the continuing arc. There was something in that episode that kind of pointed you back to it too.
Yeah, absolutely. They always had hints. X-Files was another show that did a real good job of kind of dropping little hints that if you didn't watch the episode, you'd miss them.
Yeah, so we don't want less Fringe. We want more.
More Fringe. More Fringe. I'm glad we have a full episode arc next season. That's for sure.
Me too.
Well, Ben, what do you say about that?
Okay, so let's start by correcting a little bit of misinformation.
All right.
First of all, I've watched Fringe from the beginning.
Yes.
I have watched it from the day that it premiered.
And except for the only thing that, as far as I know, that you missed were just the last probably 5 episodes before this.
Not even that much. I think there was 1 or 2 episodes I didn't watch that were part of the Soul Magnet storyline because I couldn't stand that storyline. Mm-hmm. And there might have been one other one where I watched part of it. Mm-hmm. I also never watched the one episode that they showed in season 2 that was actually from season 1 where they aired it out of order.
Yeah, I think it's called Unearthed.
Yeah, but beyond that, I have watched everything in Fringe and been a pretty big fan of it.
Yeah.
You heard me a few minutes ago list Walter as one of my top 5 sidekicks. Despite my feelings about Super 8, I am a fan of J.J. Abrams' productions in general.
Bad Robot.
Yep, Fringe being no exception to that. I think it's been a very well-written show, and I think it's done a lot of good stuff. I've loved where they've gone with the characters and how they've developed some of the ongoing storylines.
That being said,
so incorrect to say I do not like Fringe, incorrect to say that I have not watched it from the beginning, and I like Joshua Jackson. Never saw Dawson's Creek, so debunking that theory too. Just wow.
Okay.
That feud did not get off to a good start for you guys. All sorts of misinformation taking place.
But that being said, seriously, guys, Soul Magnets. Seriously,
I do not get why people defend that storyline. And you're a Fringe fan, Matt.
I am
a bigger fan than I am.
Definitely.
And you agree with me about this storyline.
I agree.
Yeah.
I don't hate it with the furious wrath that you
I don't actually hate it with furious wrath. People need to understand that when I am making a statement on the show, I be hyperbolic for the sake of good podcasting.
Yep.
I don't actually hate it that much.
And you're definitely tuning in for season 4.
Sure. I'll watch season 4.
Yeah.
But the Soul Magnet storyline, I thought was really, really bad. I thought it was incredibly weak section of storytelling, horrible writing. Didn't like at all where they went with that storyline.
And I think we can agree, and Scott and Miles didn't touch on this in their conversation about this, but you and I definitely agree that the end of season 3, that
final episode was really bad.
Really super bad. And if you'd like to talk about that, this could be a whole different topic of conversation, and we could do 2 feuds back to back, air them separately. One talking about the end of Fringe season 3, one talking about Star Trek. We need to get to the bottom of this. Did you guys like how season 3 ended? Because it was horrible.
Yeah. I think the Fringe feud will be a little bit better because I think Star Trek's just going to be a difference of opinion and preference. I just doesn't work for me. But Fringe, I think that the Soul Magnet storyline was terrible. End of season 3 was terrible. I don't know how you can defend those. Second thing they brought up was my desire for Fringe to have shorter seasons.
Oh, well, you like that in general. So,
yes.
So your stance. Your platform got out there into the public.
My stance is not just for Fringe, but for all network television in general. I don't think that 22 episode seasons make for good television, as a general rule. Even give you an example from one of my favorite shows that I've been watching, Buffy. Going back, I love this show. Great show. But both Buffy and Angel would have benefited from a little bit tighter storytelling. Mm-hmm. They would have benefited from having 16 episode seasons instead of 22 episode seasons. So it doesn't mean I don't like the show. It doesn't mean I don't like where they're going with it or how they develop the storylines. That's not true for Fringe. It's definitely not true for Buffy. However, I think that 22 episodes is a lot for one season. I think that you wind up having storylines stretched way too thin. You wind up shooting yourself in the foot as far as pacing goes. And you compare that to what's going on a network like HBO, where they have 12-episode seasons. The last few seasons of Lost, where they had 15-ish episodes a season. I thought all of those are examples of a lot tighter, better storytelling as a result of having fewer episodes, less filler, better writing. It has nothing to do with Fringe in particular, though I think that shows a particular case because we wound up getting a stupid storyline like Soul Magnet.
So, yeah, that would be a great debate.
Yeah.
So, Sci-Fi Diner.
Sci-Fi Diner, you have been called out.
You've been called out podcast style.
Yes.
So, I I guess we're just going to have to wait for your response on the next Conversations episode and let us know what you think. Or you could send us in a voicemail at
612-4121-SFC.
Yes, and also watch for our hashtag Sci-Fi Feud, in which we will be twittering random facts about you.
They will be untrue, but
Mostly.
humorously so.
Right. Or maybe we'll just have to post some articles that say bad things about Star Trek.
Oh, that could be fun.
Yeah.
Yeah. Do you remember that Onion parody when the J.J. Abrams movie came out?
No.
Oh, that's hysterical.
All right.
It totally ripped the old Star Trek.
So follow us on Twitter at
I don't remember what your hashtag is.
No.
Sci-Fi Feud.
Sci-Fi Feud, but what's our Twitter?
Oh, the Sci-Fi Christian or
The Sci-Fi Christian.
Podcast, one of the two. Go to our website. It links to it.
Hey.
SciFiChristianPodcast.com.